The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description.
Who else could it be? For me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to the Command Post Live. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. Training camp confidential for the final time in 2025, as this was the last day of training camp. The Commanders had a very situationally intense practice. The officials were out to make sure that the Commanders did things in an orderly way, making sure that the time was a factor, the ball was spotted, how quickly could you get up, spike the football in a time, sensitive situation, penalties, did you get set up formationally correct while trying to get up to the line of scrimmage and do the things you need to do, et cetera, et cetera. We've been a very penalized team this preseason, something that we hope cleans up when the starters are out on the field, but it's been somewhat of a sloppy preseason. Even when the starters were in there, there were still penalties. So something they need to clean up. So glad that the officials were out there. We'll talk more about that when we talk about what DQ had to say. But the fact that I'm talking about this being the last training camp practice means that we're getting ever so close to the start of the 2025 regular season. We are 2 weeks away officially today from the start of the regular season. Cowboys take on the Super Bowl defending champion Philadelphia Eagles, some NFC East family business. You know how the family do it. And so you're essentially 2 weeks away from this thing getting kicked off. And we got one more preseason game to get put into the rearview mirror, so to speak. We'll talk a little bit about that tonight. We'll preview that thing in all of its splendor tomorrow. So be on the lookout for that. But ultimately, today was all about getting one step closer to getting this team healthy, getting those winning time moments, starting to get those in gear, so to speak. That was such a big part of our identity last year, was being prepared. I think we were really spoiled last year, and they set the bar so high for execution and winning time moments. It's the thing that Chiefs fans have enjoyed so much, so to the point now that when it doesn't happen, they're shocked. In most instances, as a fan of any team, you're excited when your team comes up big in the clutch and gets it done. For a team like Kansas City, they expect it. Their fans expect to win, just like Brady and the Patriots. When they were in their heyday, their fans expected Brady to find a way to win the game. And when he didn't, they were shocked. Same thing with Mahomes. That's where we want to ultimately be. And I think we took a massive step in that direction last year with Jaden Daniels. We had the ultimate confidence in his ability in one-score games last season. All we ever said was just get us the football with Jaden Daniels and a shot late. That's it. Look, defense, we know you have your shortcomings and, you're not great in those late game situations. Just get the ball back to either you're going to get the stop that you need or let them score so Jaden can have it back so he can go win us the game. But just get out of the way and let Jaden do what he does. We were so confident. It even permeated to other fan bases who didn't want him to have the football in late game situations because they already knew themselves what was going to transpire. So hearing DQ talk about situational football today and how today was an intensive practice focusing solely on situational football is music to my ears, because in this league, you play a lot of close games. Our roster suggests that we're going to play a lot of close games because we don't have a blow you out type of roster. And unless we're playing teams that aren't very good, and newsflash, this isn't the schedule from last year. There aren't any Clevelands and Carolinas on this schedule that you can get your shit off on, right? There are no Tennessees on this schedule, not right now, at least. You know, we could get to the end of the season and the Vikings could stink and JJ McCarthy could have had something happen, or he could just be a catastrophe and it could be a bad football team by the time we get to them. But, you know, we don't have any of those layups on the schedule. And even when those teams were on the schedule last year, we were fearful of them, or at least respected them. I shouldn't say fearful of them, because as I don't know if he was a wise man or not, but as someone once said, we respect everyone, fear no one, right? So when you talk about us preparing for this upcoming season, it is imperative that we take care of those winning time moments, because a lot of our games, I believe, this season are going to come down to those winning time moments, just like they did a season ago. So we'll get into that a little bit more as the night progresses. But as we always do, and for the final time on Training Camp Confidential for the 2025 season, let's get some house cleaning done, right? So we start with some news. Commanders have signed center Nick Harris, so they are officially back to 90 men. Remember, they had that mass exodus last Monday where they moved on from 3 players. They put 2 more guys on lists. It was crazy. A lot of movement on the roster. They removed Terry from the PUP list. So, you know, a lot of things were moving around, a lot of moving parts. So they've released a bunch of guys throughout the course of the last, week or so, whether it's performance-based like Julian Good-Jones or Michael Strawn. So Nick Harris has been brought in because Julian Good-Jones couldn't snap the football as a center out of shotgun. So they need someone to get through this final preseason game versus the Ravens. As much as I would love to look you in your eyes right now and tell you that Nick Harris has a legitimate shot to take the place of Michael Dieter, that is not the case. And I'm not telling you that Michael Dieter's a lock to make this roster either, because we've talked about different scenarios where if Cosme is healthy enough to come off the PUP list, that puts you at 11 offensive. They're not keeping 11 offensive linemen. 10 is the max. And they can afford to keep 10 based off of the fact that you're probably keeping 2 quarterbacks, 5 receivers, and 5 linebackers. You can afford to keep 10 offensive linemen if you go with that setup. So Nick Harris is just simply a preseason game 3 body, if you will. Somebody's got to be out there taking reps in that third and final preseason game when no one else is going to be available to do so. But there's no guarantee that Michael Dieter is on this roster. It feels like Michael Dieter is going to be on this roster, though. But I've still got my fingers crossed that Nick Allegretti can serve as the backup center to Tyler Biadasz, which would then render Michael Dieter irrelevant. Couldn't do that last year because Nick Allegretti was your starting left guard. You couldn't have your starting left guard be your backup center. This year, with Allegretti being a primary reserve, obviously, if Cosme is ready, all in for week 1, then Allegretti goes to the bench, and then all of a sudden, Allegretti could be your primary center backup. You don't need Michael Dieter anymore. So I've got my fingers crossed that Michael Dieter somehow is not on this roster. But again, I won't hold my breath. Nick Harris has no impact on Michael Dieter standing on this roster. And so we did sign him today, but this is simply to get through preseason game number 3. You go to the next thing. So a couple of practice tidbits today from an injury standpoint, or in this case, a health standpoint. We got some updates. We've been trending in this direction the last 2 days. Yesterday was more of a glorified walkthrough. And so there are a lot of guys that were out on the practice field yesterday that didn't necessarily mean that they were back. I said the key was going to be, could they get out there in a full padded session like today and get out there and perform in team drills? So I got no word today from anyone. I checked all the beat reporters that I usually go to get keen information on what's going on out at the park. And I got no confirmation that Jordan McGee practiced today. Now, I have every right to believe that he practiced today, but I got no confirmation that he was out there. I'm just going to assume that he did practice today. Javonte John Baptiste practiced today in full, team drills and all. I'm going to assume that, and this is probably not a safe assumption to make based off of his track record and history here from a health standpoint, but I'm just going to assume that Jordan McGee practiced in full as well. I'll try and get, some real information for you on that, but I don't have any right now as it stands. But I do know Javonte John Baptiste was out there today. And I'm thinking the reason that we didn't hear anything about Jordan McGee being out there is because he was out there yesterday. Remember, we didn't get a Javonte John Baptiste update really yesterday, although he did practice yesterday. No one really talked about it, so it made sense that we got one today. We got a Jordan McGee update yesterday, so maybe everyone just felt like, well, we said he was at practice in full pads, or well, they didn't have full pads on yesterday, but he was in practice in full pads last week, even though he was still working off to the side. And then yesterday he was a full participant. So maybe they just felt like we don't need to tell you that he was a full participant today because he's been out there. Whatever the case may be. We got some information as to what was ailing Marcus Mariota, which really, really makes me a bit nervous. But the good thing is, if everything goes according to plan, his Achilles will have plenty of time to heal, even more so than it already has. So what we found out from today's practice is that Marcus Mariota, he was a part of at least, I think I saw like 6 or 7 different players caught up in media scrums today. I guess because this was the last day for media members to be at practice for the entire duration of practice, that they made a lot of players available to the media after practice. Mariota was one. There was a really cool exchange with Marshawn Lattimore, Mikey Sainristil, Jeremy Reeves, and then Jaden Daniels comes over and joins the party and, starts giving Mikey and Jeremy Reeves a hard time. And so that was a really cool interaction. I think Donna Hopkins had that over on her channel, or her page rather, on X. So if you haven't checked that out, that's a pretty good one there. Zach Ertz spoke to the media today. So a lot of guys were made available to the media today. So one of those guys was Mariota, and he basically said it was his Achilles. It was sore. He had Achilles tendonitis, which you never want to hear. But the good thing was it happened in the summer when nothing was going on. So he was allowed to rest, get it back to where he could get out there and start doing indie drills, which is what he did today and what he did yesterday. So now when the team settings start to take place, he's going to gradually work his way back into those. He did not participate in 11-on-11 drills today, but he is trending in the right direction to be ready for week 1. And the hope is we don't have to see Marcus on the field until there's a blowout situation in one of these games, and that's it, right? That's it. And we're the one doing the blowing out, not the other way around. So hopefully he doesn't have to see the field anytime soon, if at all. And so that thing can heal up as much as it needs to. And when he enters the game, he'll be ready to rock and roll. Now, he did say, and we saw this last year, remember, he essentially did the same thing last year, right? Where he really didn't practice last year. He played in the first preseason game, got injured. We didn't see him the rest of the summer. And when he got out there for the first time against Carolina, he was rusty. We were like, what the hell is this shit? Can't get jiggy with this shit. And it took him a little while. It took him about a quarter and a half maybe to warm up. But once he got going, boy, right before half, there was a drive that was about 93 yards or so. And he took us down and he hit Zach Ertz for a touchdown on that drive. And it felt like it ignited him. And it woke him up, and he just started balling after that. And he said he's going to be rusty the first time he plays, if he plays. That's to be expected, right? That's to be expected. So one of the big topics of the day was that Terry McLaurin was, in fact, at practice today. Now, he did not do anything. All right. Noah Brown was at practice today. He actually did do some work on the side field in some indie work, right? But he did not engage or participate in any of the team drills, did Noah Brown. But he did do some indie work off on the side field. Terry did nothing. But he did show up with a hoodie on towards the end of practice and joined the wide receivers and he watched a little bit of the 11 on 11s. So did Sam Cosmi. So that did happen. And then Terry then later joined his wide receivers group towards the end of practice, watched them practice a little bit. Then as they broke down, he and Noah Brown were there for the breaking down of the wide receiver group at the end. So Nikki Javala writes, Terry McLaurin, wearing a warm-up jacket and shorts, just walked out as the Commanders are practicing. He's on the sideline now during 11 drills. So during the team period, he walked out, and Cosmi did the same thing. They watched practice from the sidelines. And as I just mentioned to you, they broke into their individual groups, their indies. And there's a picture of that. JP Finley has a video of that on his channel. I've got a snapshot for you that we'll take a look at here in a second. As the Where's Waldo thing has kind of taken on a life of its own. But Terry McLaurin was at practice today, for those of you who actually care. Noah Brown and Cosmi are also over there on the sideline watching the ones in 11v11. So again, it's good to see Noah Brown, Sam Cosmi, and Terry McLaurin all out on the sidelines, because these guys are getting primed up and ready to go. We're getting ever so close to the start of the regular season, and it's time for them to start integrating themselves back into the mix. We're looking for resolution with the Terry situation. We're looking for resolution with the Brian Robinson Jr. situation. We're looking to get guys like Sam Cosmi and Noah Brown back healthy and on the field. And we're trending in the direction of doing that. DQ talked about Noah Brown today. We'll give you in the Noah Brown update a little bit later on in the show. But he said that he's trending in the right direction. We'll talk more about it. So it's good to kind of see all of this starting to come to fruition and come together. You know, this is what they were kind of preparing for, right? Holding Brandon Coleman out, holding Marcus Mariota out, holding Noah Brown out, you know, getting those guys where they needed to be, so that when we got to September 7th versus the New York Giants, all of these guys will be ready to go and able to help this team get the job done. And so we're trending towards all of that taking place, including getting Terry back on the field, which is going to happen, I believe, sooner rather than later. And then, as I talked about already, Nick Javala wrote, Marcus Mariota says he's been dealing with Achilles tendonitis. He says he feels good, and the plan is to be ready for week 1. And I think we all expect that to take place. Another piece of health-related news as to practice today, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, Bill, out in practice with the non-contact jersey on. He had the black jersey on. They are absolutely trying to make sure that this man is ready for week 1. This is crazy. That's the second time in a week that this man has had the non-contact black jersey on. DQ is not taking any chances with this kid, right? This man played in a whole preseason game in between the 2 black jersey days, right? He wore the black jersey right before the last practice, before the second to last practice before the preseason game versus the Bengals, right? The last padded practice. Let me just say that. Let me say it that way because he was out there, the little walkthrough that they had, but nobody was, having any contact of any sort. So the last padded practice before the Monday night preseason game 2 contest versus Cincinnati, he was in a black jersey. The first padded practice after the game, he's in another black non-contact jersey. And so DQ is not taking any chances with this kid, right? We know he had the shoulder thing in week 1 of the preseason versus New England, so that may have a little bit to do with it. But the man played in a whole preseason game, and if you were so concerned with him taking contact, you wouldn't have given him the football 11 times and put him out there behind a porous third-string offensive line to get mollywopped. So clearly, you put him out there and you let him take his lumps, and now you're giving him the black non-contact jersey. I find that very hilarious, but it also speaks to what they think about him, what his role is going to be, and the importance of they're essentially treating him like a quarterback. That's what they've done in these, padded practices, is they essentially have put the gold jersey on him. Instead, it's black because he's not a quarterback, but you can't touch him. So that's pretty high praise. Normally, you get the black non-contact when you got a concussion and you're in a protocol or something, or, you're dealing with something. They just want to make sure nobody touches you. That's the way of, making that abundantly clear to the rest of the team. But this is just more so, hey, don't touch him. We need him. That's how you treat quarterbacks. Don't touch him. We need him. Lamar Jackson got his foot stepped on in practice the other day, and all hell almost broke loose with the Ravens. Don't touch the quarterbacks, right? Don't touch Bill. Shit's crazy. I love it. So that was pretty interesting to see today as well. Moving right along. That's the picture. That's the image of Terry and Noah Brown with the receivers. This was right before, if you watch the video on JP Finley's X page, it's about a minute and 20 seconds long or so, roughly. And he's sitting there with his teammates. They're talking. Terry's got a scowl on his face for much of the conversation. But then I caught him laughing. I wanted him smiling because, every time you show him now, he's got some sort of scowl on his face, which is not who he's been for the duration of his time here in Washington. He's always got a smile on his face, but that hasn't been the case this summer because he's going through a very heated contract negotiation. That said, he started smiling there. Somebody said something that made him smile. And they about 10 seconds later, they broke down. They, broke down as a group. And then him and Noah Brown walked away together. And they were sharing something that was funny because Terry was laughing along with Noah, who was also laughing. So it was good to see him smiling. He'll be back on the field soon. We all hope sooner rather than later. But nonetheless, it was good to see Terry out there. And then, that also stops the, where's Terry questions. He's off PUP. Why isn't he out there? He's healthy. Why isn't he out there? DQ's doing his best, but he's definitely feeling the pressure of, having to keep up with a lie, basically. It's tough. So what actually happened at practice today? Here are the things that we can talk about at practice today. Zach Selby said that there was another deep shot from Jaden to Debo. What's new, right? Seems like we get one of those every single practice, especially the padded ones. Quan and Samer still in coverage. The same two always seem to get beat in coverage too. It's always Samer still because it's usually Debo in the slot, and it's always Quan over the top, just a step too late, right? So that happened. This is probably the most interesting thing that I got from practice today. Connolly and Wiley splitting reps at right tackle. I keep waiting, for the passing of the torch from Wiley to Connolly, and it just hasn't happened yet. And I don't know if it's going to happen prior to September 7th or not, but I keep waiting for them to go ahead and give Connolly the keys to the right tackle position. Is he ready for that yet? I don't know, but I'm willing to find out. I know what Andrew Wiley is at this point, and I like Andrew Wiley a lot. He's grown on me. That first year when he got here was very rocky. There was sort of a love-hate relationship with him and us as fans because there was good Andrew and there was bad Andrew. And you just always felt like if something was going to go wrong, it was going to be one of the tackles, either Leno or Wiley. It just felt like they were going to give some shit up. Well, last year, Wiley was superb. I mean, obviously they helped him a ton. I don't want to sit here and act like he was on an island the entire year and he just did his thing. But he kept it relatively quiet over there, even with the help. There were times where we left him out there isolated by himself, and he did a really good job. And so his versatility this summer, DQ praised him for that. He's played left and right tackle. He's played left guard as well. He's jumped right in and did whatever was necessary for the team to be successful. But I'm ready for Josh Connolly to assume the right tackle position and be the guy. And I'm waiting for them to pass him the torch. I wonder if it happens when that first Deppy comes out, the official depth chart comes out after the 53-man roster on Tuesday is crystallized and that depth chart hits the streets. I wonder if Josh Connolly will be listed as the starting right tackle. I wonder if Josh Connolly is going to play in this game on Saturday afternoon against the Ravens. That's an even more interesting question, because if he's your starting right tackle, you don't need to put him out there. But he could end up being your starting right tackle week 1, but you want him to get more reps. So you put him out there. So you can't really just judge based off of is he out there or isn't he out there. It's not as cut and dry as, hey, if Brian Robinson Jr. doesn't play in this game on Monday night, he's getting traded because he's fully healthy, right? It's not as cut and dry as that. If he plays, they could just want to see him get more reps and see him dominate these second and third stringers that he's going to be out there against, and just want to make sure and confirm that, yeah, he's ready. Wiley's been good though, man. And my guy, shout out to my guy Derek B. He was one of the few people that was like, they're going to split reps again, just like we saw last year with Brandon Coleman and Cornelius Lucas. They're going to split reps at right tackle to start the season. I don't think that's going to be the case. It's one or the other, I believe. And I think they want it to be Connolly. So interesting to see that they were splitting reps again today with another thing that was great news. We talked about this yesterday. Brandon Coleman returned to practice yesterday, and he was on the field with the first team offensive line during 11-on-11 drills. So in the team period, he was out there at left guard, which is music to all of our ears, because now you're starting to see a semblance of what this offensive line is going to be. I think with Coleman being inserted back into the starting lineup at left guard, and I think Connolly closing in on locking up the right tackle position, you now have 4/5 of your offensive line intact, which is something that we haven't been able to say really all summer, because between the rest, vet rest days they've been giving Laramie Tunzel, the injury to Brandon Coleman, and the uncertainty at right tackle, we really can't say that we've had 4/5 of the offensive line together at any point really this summer, because initially it was Andrew Wiley, but I don't think he's going to be the starter. So now I think when you see Connolly out there, with Coleman out there, with Tunzel, and of course Tyler Biadasz, you've probably got 4/5 of your offensive line, with the one missing piece being Cosme, who I think has a chance to be ready for the early part of the season. I don't think he's going to be ready to start week 1. I don't think that's going to be the case. I feel like if that were, I can tell you this, they're very excited about the progress he's made. And I think he's ahead of schedule for them. And DQ keeps talking about he's hitting every mile marker. So I think they are very encouraged. And I've already told you they're gonna remove him from the PUP list before the season starts. I don't anticipate him being ready for week 1. I keep saying week 3 is what I see. But this offensive line is starting to take shape. And that is exciting because we really haven't been able to establish any sort of continuity this summer with all the moving parts. So I think next week's practice, after they trim this roster down to 53, that's going to be an important week of practice because that'll be the first time this offensive line starts to have a chance to gel and mesh together. And that's when you'll start putting in, the plays for the Giants. You'll start installing for the Giants game. And it'll be good to see these guys get all of that work together and start to get on the same page. So the offensive line is starting to it's starting to come together, and it's exciting to see because this, along with the cornerback position, are two of the most improved positions on the team. Cornerback to me is the most improved. Offensive line is probably the second most improved, followed by very closely the defensive line. So I'm excited. We just got one more guy we got to get back on that line, and then all of a sudden we got a line that's whole, and we think this line has a chance to be, I think it has a chance to be like top 13 this year. I'm not willing to say top 10 yet. Got to see these guys play, stay healthy, and again, gel and mesh together. But just off the talent that exists here, Coleman, Cosme have a chance to be really good guards, I believe, in this league. We know Cosme's already been an Pro Bowler, at the guard position. Tunzel is a 5-time Pro Bowler, yet to be an All-Pro. That could happen this year when you're on a team that's successful. With the quarterback like Jaden Daniels, you get accolades. He could easily be an All-Pro tackle this year. It's going to be tough. It's a lot of good tackles on this side of the bracket, specifically the Philadelphia Eagles tackles. Jordan Mailata and Tristan Wirfs are two of the best tackles in football. So it's going to be hard to be an All-Pro. And then you have Trent Williams still playing at a high level when he's healthy. So it's going to be hard for him to be an All-Pro on this side. But, he could be second-team All-Pro potentially. Who knows? Bottom line is, with Tunzel and his talent, Coleman and his potential, Cosme and his talent, Biotish and his consistency, and Connolly and his upside, this could be a really good offensive line, right? It could be a really, really good offensive line. So let's get to DQ's presser. And see what he had to say for his last training camp press conference of 2025. He started out the presser by showing some gratitude to the fans, Josh Harris, and the players. He talked about the importance of the fans showing up. He felt their energy during camp. He thanked Josh Harris for all the upgrades around the facility, whether it's outside on the practice field, the bubble, etc., or inside the facility, where they had numerous upgrades to the locker room, to the lunchroom, to the weight room. They have a new name for the performance center, right? So all of that is due to Josh Harris and that group coming in and totally changing the face of this franchise inside and out. So he thanked Harris and company for all that they've done, basically putting their money where their mouth is. And then the players, he said, they knew it was going to be a tough camp, a lot of moving parts. And it definitely has been a tough camp because of the Terry situation. Now the Brian Robinson Jr. situation. I don't know if you guys have been paying attention, but they've talked to Bill multiple times since the Brian Robinson Jr. news hit. I don't know if you guys watched the post-game press conferences or the media scrums in the locker room with some of the young guys. they talked to Jeremy Reeves after the game. They talked to B.I. Double after the game, and they talked to Jalen Lane after the game. And B.I. Double basically was like, I don't want to talk about it when it came to B-Rob, because it's a sore spot for him, because B-Rob was like his OG. Like, he came in, B-Rob took him under his wing. They're both from Alabama, so they share some of that in common. And he really felt like this is the guy that I'm kind of looking up to, kind of figuring out how this NFL shit works, and I'm figuring it out from him. And all of a sudden, like that, he's gone. And so he was like, yo, that's my dog. And, you know, they asked him how he felt, and he tried to find the words after the game, and he was just like, I don't want to answer that, man. Like, next question, basically. Like, he ain't have any words for him. So it's tough. This summer has been tough on the players in certain regards. Like, most of these dudes just going about their business, you know, but you keep hearing the Terry questions. Now you got to answer B-Rob questions, or you at least got to, you know, have the media talking about it. And so there's been a lot of moving parts for sure, but ultimately the players, you know, did what they needed to do. And I think we're in a really good spot heading into this third and final preseason game. Then laid out the unique practice setup that they were having today with the officials. He said, he being DQ, that this was the first time in his coaching career that the officials came out to practice, like real game officials came out to practice and actually treated it like a real game-like situation for them just practicing. It wasn't a scrimmage of any sort. It wasn't a joint practice. It was just them practicing. And the officials, they have officials come out all the time, but it's not game officials. They're just officials that are contracted by the NFL to go out there, uphold the rules, do, you know, et cetera, et cetera. These are actual guys that will be calling games on Sundays, refereeing games on Sundays, Mondays, Thursdays, Saturdays, etc. And so he's like, this is the first time I've had that happen where we weren't doing some sort of joint practice or some sort of scrimmage. It's just us practicing, but he's like, this is pretty cool. And he said that today was going to be heavy on situational football. He's like, we're getting a lot of that situational work that you saw from last year. We talk about winning time, moments. Well, he said we played in 13 games that were one-score affairs, and obviously I think we went 9-4 in those 13 games. So a huge chunk of our success came in the games that were close, and we found ways to pull them out. So the only game, like last year, the only 9-4, right? The only game we lost where we got our asses handed to us, and it wasn't a one-score game, was the first game of the season against Tampa, right? So it's going to be really interesting to see. What was the Cowboys score? I think we lost that game by 9. Or was it 8? I think it was 8. I don't remember. I think we lost by 8 to them. And 8. It might have been. I feel like it was more than 8. I thought it was 12 once. He said 13, but I thought it was 12. I thought we were 9-3 in those one-score games. And then the Tampa game and the Dallas game were the two that weren't one-score games that we lost during the season. That's what I thought, but whatever. The situational football is huge for us. And I laid that out at the beginning of the show, right? He then said, he talked about, and, you know, something that really bothers me, and I know we've talked about this in the past. It really hasn't been as big of an issue anymore, but, you know, me being a stickler for attention to detail, like, why can't we get the mic situation with the media straight so we can hear the questions that are being asked of DQ? Like, usually it takes like the first 2 or 3 questions to be asked before the mic finds someone, and now we can hear the questions. Like, why is that? Why can't we get that shit? Like, so now it's like plugging holes in a dike, right? You plug this hole and now it's another leak that springs over here. You plug that hole and now it's another leak that springs over here. So the first issue was every time we sit down for one, we sit down to watch one of these press conferences. If you don't watch it live, and I never watch these things live, right? I'm never just sitting down when they go live. I'm always doing something else. I'm either not in the office, I'm asleep, or I'm somewhere else. And that's intentionally, right? Because I'm going to come back and sit there, take my notes, et cetera, et cetera. But in doing that, a lot of times they cut off the first 15 to 30 seconds of the press conference. So then I got to go somewhere else and find those first 15 to 30 seconds to see what he said, so I make sure I don't miss anything. So that's a problem. And usually when that happens, the mic is working right away, right? It's like we can't have both. Now that DQ, they actually have the cameras running with no one sitting in the seat, whether it's DQ, Joe Witt Jr., or Cliff Kingsbury, and then they sit down and you're like, oh shit, I get to watch the entire thing. I don't have to go somewhere else. Now, no one has the mic at the beginning. It's so maddening. So the first like two questions John Combs asking them, and you really don't know what the hell he said. You just have to assume and guess what he said based off of DQ's answer. We didn't even hear the goddamn question. Anyway, he talked about the offensive line and the focus on the offensive line this summer. He said the run game and the scheme, he's been really impressed with how the guys have adapted and adjusted to some of the things they've asked them to do. Because last year we didn't run a lot of gap. Really, we didn't run any gap scheme. And he said this year they've implemented some of the gap scheme into the offense, and he feels good about what he's seen from the offensive lineman. Now, he said it's still a work in progress, partly because they haven't seen like the entire offensive line together. And so it's hard to know what it actually will look like when you have all your starters out there because you just haven't seen it. So he's impressed, though, by what guys have done, various guys stepping into spots and holding it down. So he talked about that. He said, then he talked about Noah Brown. We got the update on Noah Brown. And if you didn't watch Rio's interview with Ben Standing this morning, again, you're doing yourself a disservice. Go check that out. It was excellent by Rio. Ben Standing actually did really well. Not that I didn't expect him to, but I thought he, was a great interview and answered the questions and actually had a bit of a sense of humor too. It's always cool when you get to see some of these guys kind of peel back some layers because, they're always in professional mode. So you get to get them off to the side. I always enjoy some of the backstage conversations that I have with these guys and women that I have come on my show because you get to see the real them, right? You usually get the button-up version. Like the first time I talked to John Comm and he dropped an F-bomb, I was like, oh, shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, because you don't get that from John Comm, right? He's a professional. But they're people. They're human. You know what I'm saying? So it was pretty cool to see Ben Standing in that element, right? But he talked about Noah Brown, and he's like, yo, if nobody else asks about Noah Brown today, I promise you, if I get the mic, I'm going to ask DQ about Noah Brown. Well, John Keim beat him to the punch and asked about Noah Brown. And so DQ gave us an update. And he basically gave us the return to play line and that he gave us for Terry the other day. But you can tell Noah Brown's close. He actually worked out today. And again, off on the side, but he's getting closer and closer. And I think this was always their goal with him, is to get him ready for week one. They could care less about him performing out here. But to Ben Standing's point, and we've talked about this, Noah Brown doesn't stay healthy. Knock on wood. But Noah Brown don't stay healthy. And so, like, who's going to step up? And so Ben Standing told Rio, look, I'm going to ask him about Noah Brown, and I'm going to ask him about the receiver position as a whole, because you can't count on Noah Brown. So who's going to step up? And that's exactly what Ben Standing did. We'll talk about the question that he asked a little bit later. But in terms of Noah Brown, he said that he's working on the acceleration, the deacceleration, the deceleration, excuse me. And so he's at that point now that, Terry is supposed to be at, where, you're kind of working through some of the conditioning aspect, the acceleration, the deceleration, getting, the cuts coming in and out of breaks, etc. I think Noah Brown's, close. I feel like if there were a game next week, which there isn't, which is great for Noah Brown, gives him even more time to continue to rehab and work up, his endurance and get that cardio, getting it up to speed, which he's still going to struggle with because, and that's every player. He's not alone. That first week of football is usually tough on the players because most of these guys haven't played more than a couple possessions. So you're not going to have your win. Your lungs have not expanded to this level yet. But I think if there were a game next week, Noah Brown would be able to play. I truly believe that. So I think he's very, very close. He was asked about the process of cutting down the roster to 53 guys and how does that kind of work? And he said that AP has started that process already because the way the question was framed pretty much insinuated that DQ already knows who's going to make the roster, which I told you guys this already. I think I was having this conversation with my wife. I think it was either today or yesterday, where she said, was asking me about Saturday's game and, who's going to play and this, that. And I'm like, nobody's playing in the game of note. And if someone does play, it's not going to be for very long. But ultimately, they already know who's on the roster. Like, this game is it's all but a formality. I said, matter of fact, the conversation was this morning on the way to work. I was taking her to work, and I told her that this game isn't really about making the roster here. It's about trying to make the practice squad here, because I do think the practice squad is not spoken for quite yet. I do think there are still guys fighting for one of those 16, practice squad spots. But I told her it's more about auditioning for the other 31 teams in the league, because the roster here is already spoken for the most part, right? So he said AP is already, getting with coaches, watching film with them, kind of going through some of the players at their, position groups, talking about some of the guys individually with each position group. He's done that. And then when it's all done, they're going to come together. We've seen this on Hard Knocks, right? Similar to like the draft war room, when everybody's got their guy and you go in front of the room and you kind of make your pitch for your guy. You stand on the table, as they like to say. But it's the same thing. We've seen it in Hard Knocks, where you go into the conference room. It's all of the positional coaches. It's the offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, special teams coordinator, and all of the positional coaches. Sometimes they even shrink that. They start out like that, and then they shrink it down to the coordinators and the head coach and the general manager. And then it then shrinks down to just the head coach and the general manager. And they start to have these conversations. And you're asking a guy, do you need this guy? And then you ask this other guy, like, if it's between this guy and this guy, your linebacker or this wide receiver, are you confident that your guy can give us what we need on special teams? And then you ask the special teams coordinator, which of these two guys, the linebacker or the wide receiver, which one do you prefer? And he'll tell you, like, this guy for teams, give me this guy, right? So these are the conversations that are being had. And he talked about that in terms of cutting down to 53 men. He also said that he told the players, don't think about next week. Next week won't help you this week. Put your best foot forward, let the chips fall where they may, and see what happens, right? So then Ben Standing got the mic and he told, he told Rio he was going to do. He went up and he asked DQ about the wide receiver depth, and he said, "We're to assume that Terry's going to be back. Noah Brown is trending in that direction, but we, don't know what his status is going to be. But, assuming that somebody isn't able to go, how do you feel about the depth? We've talked about it all summer about the wide receiver depth. How do you feel about that position as a whole? And he basically just went straight to 2 receivers. That's kind of where we at. He did mention Chris Moore, and Chris Moore had gotten injured in the Patriots game, so he had been out. That's why we didn't see him against the Bengals. We haven't heard about him because he got injured in that game against the Patriots. So he mentioned Chris Moore in kind of in passing, which I was like, why are you even bringing him up for? His ass ain't making this damn roster. I say that shit, but they still could keep 6, and they could still feel like Chris Moore because he has played in this league and he has had success in this league as Chris Moore. They may still think he can help. Like, he's gotten open. His problem is he don't catch the goddamn football. And he also plays special teams. So I keep dismissing Chris Moore. I've been dismissing him from day one. I've been very dismissive of him, and I continue to be. And after that Patriots game, I wanted his ass gone, right? But he talked about Jalen Lane in particular and Luke McCaffrey were the 2 that he brought up. And he said, we tried both of them outside against Cincinnati in week 2 of the preseason intentionally to see what those guys could do if they were put in those positions so we could see what we have and understand that if Noah can't go, they're not taking Debo out of the slot. That's essentially what they're trying to tell us without saying it. Debo is a slot receiver. We want to keep him there. They're going to move him around, and he may end up outside from time to time, but he is a slot receiver for them. That's where they want him. That's where they plan on playing him. And so I think Jalen Lane is a guy that and Ben Stanek said this. He said he likens Jalen Lane's role potentially to that of Mikey Sainristil last year as a rookie because they really wanted Mikey inside, but because of circumstances, they had to push Mikey outside. Jalen Lane, they drafted him to be a slot receiver, but because of circumstances, they may have to push him outside. So that was another kind of keen observation by Ben Stanek. And Jalen Lane handled that role very well in preseason game number 2 versus Cincinnati. They liked what they saw. DQ talked about him stepping up in that game. And he also talked about Luke McCaffrey getting an opportunity to be outside. And Luke did some good things if you watch the All-22s. So ultimately, he thinks those 2 guys can handle being outside if need be. And that's kind of where the depth is coming from. And then, as I mentioned, he mentioned Chris Moore. And I was like, you don't need to do that at all, ever. He then was asked about C-Rod. And, when you look at Chris Rodriguez Jr., you initially go straight to his size, the physicality that he plays with. It's very similar to that of B-Rob. And so everyone just assumes, oh, he's going to be the B-Rob replacement. And that's a very logical, thought. But DQ was like, he offers some different things. He's a better pass catcher out of the backfield than B-Rob. He plays special teams, which B-Rob does not. And they feel like he can do a little bit more than maybe Brian Robinson Jr. could in some other instances. We'll see. But ultimately, he said, yes, we do see him being able to fill some of those short yardage situations, et cetera, et cetera. But he didn't want to just put him in a box, which I can respect, right? He said that we have an unconventional offense, and that lends itself to a guy like Chris Rodriguez getting other opportunities. And when he said that, I thought about some of the formations we ran last year. Like, you could see, like, we saw Chris Rodriguez at fullback last year on a couple of snaps. So you could line him up at fullback and give it to him on a fullback dive. The Chiefs do it all the time. Like, anytime it used to be 4th and 1, the Chiefs would put their fullback in and they would give it to him on a fullback dive. That was their 4th down and short play. Andy Reid loved fullback dive. So you could see C-Rod in the backfield, and we did last year at fullback. They fake it to the running back. He leak into the flats, and you throw it to him. Like you would do a Colson Yank, like you would do a Ben Sinnott who was playing that H-back type role for us last year. That's the touchdown he scored against Carolina. He was in the backfield as a fullback / H-back. They faked it to the running back. Mariota booted, got to the corner, hit Sennett, who was wide open for the touchdown, right? So we had the dual backfield, right, against Philadelphia in the first game, where you had two backs in the backfield. So it is an unconventional offense, and it will give C-Rod some opportunities. But ultimately, he's probably going to fill the B-Rob role, not necessarily as the starter like B-Rob was, but, you know, those short yardage situations and that power back that you look for. So David Harrison of Locked On Commanders asked DQ about Quan Martin and how mentally that he overcame an obstacle on Monday night that I didn't even realize was a thing. So Quan Martin had double shoulder surgery, as we are all aware of this offseason. We did not know that initially, but turns out he had double shoulder surgery and was playing with two dislocated shoulders, right? So it gave you a greater appreciation for the toughness that he exuded last year. And I always talk about, I side with players. This is why. We have no idea. We only know half the story. We only know what we see. You don't know what these guys go through. And if you've played football before, and it doesn't matter at what level, if you've played football or any sport for that matter, you know how taxing it can be on your body, especially football, because it's a physically demanding sport. And you know what it takes to go out there and play, because it's tough. You're injured. You don't really get a chance to heal until the season's over. So you have to play through things. But that's any sport, really. But football in particular, right? Basketball players get an injury and they sit out for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, and then come back. Football players don't really get that chance. You got to suck it up. You got to do what you got to do to play. And Quan played through 2 dislocated shoulders or separated shoulders and had surgery. And this was his first game action since those surgeries. And I didn't really think about it. It didn't dawn on me how big of a mental hurdle he had to overcome to say, hey, you're good. You can go out here. You can play physically. You can cut it loose. You're okay. Because after surgery, these are things that you have to mentally tell yourself. And he looked great. He had the open field tackle early in the game, and then obviously the big tackle down by the goal line to keep the tight end Sample out of the end zone. So he talked about Quan Martin, and he said Quan is turning into one of the leaders of this team. You know, he's a guy that is, you know, vastly becoming one of the go-to guys on this roster, someone that other players look up to, guy that leads by example. His status within the locker room, they love Quan Martin, first and foremost. You know, DQ started smiling when he talked about his toughness. He's like, did you have any doubt that he was going to go out there and cut it loose, right? Because that's who he is. All I want to see from him now is I want him to kind of revert back to the playmaker he was at Illinois. Part of the reason we were excited about him in the second round is because he used to take it away in college. He really hasn't done that at the NFL level. He's had his moments, the Patriots interception in his rookie season to clinch that game. Obviously, the pick six is the crown jewel and the biggest highlight of his career to this point, the pick six versus Detroit in the divisional round. I want more of those type plays, more of him being an impact player. And I think he's capable. And they think he is poised for a massive year this season. And I'm here for all of it. Hopefully it takes place. Then DQ talked about the biggest stressor this time of the year is cutting the roster down to 53 and kind of having to figure out how much playing time is the right amount, you know, what buttons to press to give guys an opportunity to really showcase what they can do, that sort of thing. He's like, sometimes he struggles with the, you know, did I do enough to showcase if guys are capable aspect of things. But he said, obviously it's a stressful time cutting the roster down. But he said, yeah, that's the biggest stressor. That's the thing that keeps him up at night. And then he talked about Jaden paying it forward to Bill. Obviously, Jaden went out and got Bill's first touchdown ball after he scored. Bill was so excited he dropped the ball, didn't know where it was. Jaden went out and got it for him. And Candy told the story to DQ about what Jaden said to the media, which was, essentially he paid it forward last year when he was, when he played against the Jets and he had the rushing touchdown. He did the same thing with the ball. He dropped the ball, did a little dance. And it was Terry McLaurin and Bobby Wagner that made sure that he got his first touchdown ball last year. So he, DQ did not know that had happened to Jaden last year. He said, I remember him throwing his first touchdown pass last year and who it was to, right? We all remember that first touchdown because it took him 3 weeks to get his first touchdown pass. We wanted him to get touchdown passes every week and he couldn't seem to find guys to get into the end zone. So he finally got it in week 3 versus Cincinnati to Trent Scott. He said, I remember who he threw it to, but I didn't remember the Jets preseason game touchdown he scored and what happened with that football. So that was news to him that, Bobby Wagner and Terry McLaurin made sure that he got his ball, and Jaden basically paid it forward. And DQ basically said that this is the brotherhood. That's what the brotherhood is all about. And he's like, that's something that we, would love to see turn into some sort of tradition, just making sure that a rookie who scores his first touchdown gets his football. And he's like, he talked about it, I think it was the first presser after the game on Monday night, about how he loved the sideline brotherhood, how, Jonathan Jones was coaching up. And he mentioned that Jonathan Jones, Raincoat was coaching up the guys on the sidelines, and how Bobby Wagner was, giving guys pointers and tips, and, guys were engaged in the game. The veterans were. Obviously, Jaden's acts of kindness to, pay it forward and make sure that Bill got his football. These are all things that DQ praises, preaches, and you can tell that he is very pleased with the way the brotherhood has formulated under his leadership. And now it's gotten to the point where he doesn't have to be involved in it. He can take a step back and watch the fruits of his labor and watch guys, taking care of one another, and know that I did that. I put the battery in their backs. I planted these seeds. Now I'm watching them grow. So that was basically DQ today. And in the last training camp practice, we'll have a breakdown of what to watch for tomorrow for Saturday's game. Obviously, it's not a ton. So be on the lookout for that. But ultimately, I don't think there's a ton of roster spots on the line, maybe 1 or 2. I've been adamant that, a name to watch out for is Eddie Goldman. I could see Carl Davis potentially making the roster over him, but I think Eddie's safe. I went back and watched the game a little bit more. Eddie was out there pretty early, and Eddie did a good job of collapsing the pocket. I think Eddie's safe. I think he's going to be fine. So, we'll see. We'll see what everything ultimately amounts to from a preseason week 3 standpoint against the Ravens. But anyway, I digress. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on the Command Post Live Training Camp Confidential. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys. Next time, again, we'll have a preview of the Ravens preseason game number 3 tomorrow. Outside of that, if you haven't already done so, please donate to the Commanders Kings live event. It's sold out. I'm excited and pleased to announce that it's sold out. We're gonna have a great time. And if you can't be there in attendance, if you weren't one of the 150 people to buy tickets, you can still be a part of the live show by donating. Head over to the link that you could purchase tickets at. Go all the way down to the bottom of the screen where you will find the donation tiers: bronze, silver, gold, and wild card. Any donation that is made will get you a shout out on the stream because, again, you are a huge part of making it happen. So that is going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on the Command Post Live. You guys enjoy the rest of your night. Take care. God bless and good night. Peace.